Hi, all. These are generally conversations between adults after the children have left the table. The language can be spicy and the subjects can get saucy. So if you're ready, this is the Southern Fork. Unscripted kitchen chats and also studio chats with some of the most interesting voices in the culinary South. I'm Stephanie Burt, a food and beverage writer based in Charleston, South Carolina, who travels with her fork to write for a variety of publications, from magazines you might have on your coffee table to the website you love to visit for your favorite recipes. And I'm inviting you to come behind the scenes with me to get to know the people who make this Southern culinary landscape so special. I'm always hungry for the next bite, thirsty for that next sip, and ready for the next conversation. Let's dig in. Now, you planted a garden in the spring, and I've seen so many of you with those kiddie pools. Now what? The bounty of your garden is probably starting to take up counter space in your kitchen just about now. The fruits and at the farmers markets, and these days you're thinking a little more about how to make your house more of a home, aren't you? Well, I have just the person to help with all of that. Ashley English is the author of 11 books, including the Homemade Living book series, which showcases a variety of topics related to small-scale homesteading, including keeping chickens, canning and preserving, keeping bees, home dairy, and home apothecary. Her work and life revolve around her home in the Blue Ridge Mountains of North Carolina, and she translates that experience into wonderful practical instruction in a variety of mediums in order to teach us how to bring a little homesteading magic into our own lives. Welcome to the Southern Fork.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Oh, well, I'm so excited that this modern technology has connected us. And I should say that I should start with Instagram first, and now this app that we're using to chat today. You are sitting outside on your beautiful idyllic porch, and I know what it looks like because of Instagram, in Candler, North Carolina, right?
That's correct. Yeah, it's funny how people know my life.
You're like, I'm a little creeped out.
I like it. I wouldn't, if I weren't comfortable with it, we wouldn't make ourselves as public as we do.
Following your feed always gives me kind of a breath of calm because you live in this beautiful glade and you're homesteading. So there's a lot to do all the time. And they just seem to be like a really cooler version of Martha Stewart living, every day when I look. So
that's good to hear.
Despite the craziness of this year, it seems that this year is your year.
Yeah, it's strange. It's strange.
Can you talk a little bit about the increase in your traffic and your questions and your interest in the subject areas that you cover?
Sure. I've just noticed, as a participant and a producer, that the interest in homesteading, be it starting a garden or keeping chickens or canning and preserving, making sourdough, is everyone in the world, I think, is making sourdough right now.
Not me. Myrtle went down the disposal because she couldn't do it. She
was a COVID casualty.
She was.
Well, it's been interesting. My husband will run to the gardening store and he can't find tomato cages, or he can't find, certain types of compost that we've had no trouble getting forever. Mm-hmm. There's been exponential runs on people purchasing chicks from from local places and online through hatcheries and people getting into beekeeping. And I think it's a combination of food security. People are concerned,
Yes.
Rightfully so, about the food supply chain and being able to access fresh, nutritious food. I think it's a byproduct of people having had more time on their hands, especially over the spring. When everything completely shut down and people started looking literally where they were to see what they could do so they didn't lose their mind.
Yes.
And and all those things have coalesced in an interest in what I've been doing and writing about since I left my job over 12 years ago. My paying job, I would say my regular stable office job, and embrace this life. So it's been interesting to see. And obviously I love the work that I do and what I get to write about. And we joke that we were kind of very well primed for this particular scenario because my husband and I work from home together and we homeschooled our oldest son for the first 2 years. So we're kind of like, we got this,
You're like, y'all freak out. I'm already wearing my yoga pants every day.
I'm like, why would you get out of your pajamas to work? Just roll with it, just keep it going all day. But I can see why people that aren't used to being around their kids all the time or being around their spouse all the time or just being at home all the time, or that are especially gregarious or social. I mean, we're very social. We always entertain here. So that's the thing we've joked about the most is our property looks the best it's probably ever looked and no one's coming over right now.
Mine is like, I have become a better cook. I am an extrovert. And so I have become a better cook, but only for me. And so it's the opposite. And my life is, I'm a travel writer too. So I'm traveling and that, mainly domestically, but it's very odd for me to be at home for this length of time. But I already work at home. So I feel like I was a little more prepared too. Definitely not to the point of your preparation, but it was an easier transition until now when I'm like done. I'm like, oh my God.
Oh, yeah.
But I'd love to talk about what drew you to this subject matter and how maybe some things have surprised you about the journey that you've been on. That's a big question, but
it is a big question. And it's interesting the way it kind of all played out. So just to back up, so some history, I met and married my husband in 2007. We kind of had a fast and furious courtship. We met on New Year's Day. 2 weeks later, he asked me to marry him. I said yes. And then 4.5 months after that, we got married. So from when we met to when we were married was 5 months. And I just knew it. He's 9 years older than me. He's really picky. I'm really picky. All of our pickiness lined up. And I was like, it would be crazy. Plus he's just a wonderful, wonderful person. And so, we got married and, he came with a house and property where I live now. And when he had purchased it 2 years before we met, it had been in its previous life, a certified organic edible herb and flower farm. So there were hoop houses here from the previous owners where they grew all their herbs. And there's a big field that they had an herbal spiral in. And anyway, at the time I was working in a doctor's office as a nutrition consultant, which is what I have a degree in, and a medical assistant. And I love my job, but I knew I wasn't going to one day like walk in and be the doctor or a nurse or I knew there was a ceiling there and I got this idea, I thought maybe I can bring back this farm. I love to be outside. I love to work with plants. I had already been doing a lot of homesteading things. I grew up in that tradition with my grandmother who had a pick your own blueberry farm in Chesapeake, Virginia and a big garden and chickens. And I was like, well, maybe I'll just take this leap of faith and do it. So I gave a month's notice at my job. And a few days before my very last day, I got a call from a very close friend of mine who also happened to be a senior editor at Lark Books, which at the time was based in Asheville. And she's like, look, I know you're about to quit you're going to quit your job. You're taking this big leap of faith. I've had this idea for a homesteading book series. Do you want to write it?
And you were like, and there's the yes I needed. Thank you.
Exactly. There's the door for me to walk through. And it really just kind of, I mean, when people say, how do I get into publishing? I'm like, well, it's not going to happen to you the way it happened to me because it was ridiculous the way it happened for me. But I do have actual sound advice for other people that doesn't involve a friend asking you to write a book series. And then other things just emerged along the way. You know, I pitched more ideas. Some things got picked up. Some things got turned down. I did freelance writing for a new magazine, and the editor at that magazine said, hey, what are you working on? And I told her how some things had been turned down, and she said, well, I've got someone I could introduce you to. And then that opened the door to another publishing relationship that I've done my past few books with. So, you know, these are things that I'm very passionate about. I was telling my dad the other day, I was like, because my birthday was last week, and he's like, I think you're really hard to shop for a gift. And I said, I think I'm really easy. And he said, why? And I said, because literally anything to do with home, I'm all about it. Whether it's, you know, the garden, the kitchen, entertaining, decorating, crafting, anything to do with the home, parenting. I'm like, that's where I find my bliss. So, you know, all these things they're ancillary, they're adjacent, they're under this big umbrella of home. And I feel very, very fortunate that I get to do it.
Well, we feel fortunate for you too. Because that was pretty, everything about that whole story you just told was kind of magical. So,
yeah.
But we can take this idea from it that, you know, I'm listening as a writer. I'm thinking, you know, your good friend had to know you were doing this. You had to be passionate about the idea. You had to be excited about the idea, and you had to speak up. And you spoke up to that editor that said, what else are you working on? You were able to say, look, I haven't been able to pick these up. So there are lessons there in it for those of us who are not angelically touched in this particular area. So thanks for that. But learning along the way, you're writing as you're learning. So that's such a fun process too. So you have to learn more than you actually share in writing, because you have to have underpinning for what you're saying so that it makes sense.
Absolutely. And the thing that I keep in mind with all my books too is these are all geared towards a beginner. They're primers. You know, they're to give you a foundation. And then from there, if you want to go to Georgia Tech and get your poultry science degree, you know, or become a certified master canner or what have you, it's like a springboard of inspiration. I'm here to like give you that sure footing to feel confident to take it further.
And that's what I love about your work. And so before we get into some specific tips that I'm hoping that you're going to provide for us and talk a little bit about what you're up to now, you know, I grew up in an area, I grew up in Charlotte. I was a kid of the 70s, and my mom was really into the homesteading ideas. She canned, we had a garden, but we were very suburban. You know, we lived 15 minutes from where Panther Stadium is now. So it doesn't have to be living off the land, homeschooling your children like you and your husband are, you know, there are varying levels that you can do. But I think that kind of childhood still informs me today. Like that kind of understanding about food and home and the cycle of the seasons and stuff is really one of the foundations that I built my work on. So how do you talk to newcomers about, like, what would be one of the first things? Okay, we know people have grown a garden. We know they're making sourdough. What would be kind of that next step for people, you know, so that they feel like not so overwhelmed and intimidated? Because you've built this life over years. This isn't something that just popped up. You know, you had to learn all of that. So what would be that next step?
I would say, you know, because again, like you mentioned, some people, they're going to be limited by the constraints of their lived reality. They're not going to have backyard space to keep a flock of chickens, perhaps, or maybe they live in a housing situation that prohibits keeping chickens, or maybe they want to do things, but they can't get the bees, they can't get the goat, what have you. The next step in the journey, I would say, as a homesteader, is any sort of food preservation, because you can do that anywhere you have a kitchen. You can preserve food. You can can food. You can ferment food. You can start making flavored salts. You can make infused oils, vinegars. These things you can do as long as you have access to a kitchen, and that's anywhere, whether you're in Brooklyn or you're way out, on a multi-hundred acre homestead somewhere out west. As long as you have access to a kitchen, I would say anything to do with food preservation. And that includes making your own butter, making your own cheeses, making your own yogurt. It's that kind of like baby steps. Like you said, they're cumulative. You can do a whole hog and dive in, and then you'll feel completely overwhelmed and you'll throw in the towel really quickly.
Right. And I have to tell myself in two ways. And then we're going to segue. I would consider myself a homesteader, even though I have only grown one banana pepper this year. It's a sad plant, and it has only allowed me to have one. But I'm a big fan of going to the farmer's market and getting that box of kind of bruised and overripe fruit, and then coming home and processing it. I've also made my own cheese for block paneer, and I was amazed how easy it was. I thought that I was a goddess after it finished. And I mean, you're just like, oh my God, this is it? This is all you have to do to make ricotta or cottage cheese or, whatever. And then on the other hand, I can't pick up a chicken. So I have a hard time imagining actually having chickens because I'm frightened by them. They're pecking, they're flapping. And so I want to know some tips on that. And I had a partner at one point that said, if you can shut up about chickens, you're going to go to your friend's house. And if you can pick one up, we're going to get some. We're going to go on the way home and get some. And I couldn't do it. So to this day, I don't have chickens. So that didn't stop me from doing the other stuff that you're saying, like the vinegars or the salts or pouring my sad myrtle sourdough starter down the disposal. Doesn't mean that I'm not doing other stuff. So there's a lot to be done. And you're not just writing books about it. Right now, you're about to start a big summer series. And that's one of the reasons I wanted to make sure and get you on this summer, because you're going to be teaching online courses called Slow Jams. Is that right?
That's right. Yeah. Like so many people, I had to pivot what I was doing, and I had all these in-person classes lined up that I was going to be teaching, and speaking engagements I was going to do, and other projects I was working on. And it all came to a total halt back in March. And so then I thought, well, okay, what can I do that still works? And my son, who goes to this very, very small school, this very super small, tiny school, the past few years on a farm here in Asheville, his school switched to Zoom classes. And when I saw how that all played out, I thought, maybe there's something there for me that I could figure out as well. Mm-hmm. And then a close friend of mine who also is in the world of food, a fellow author and blogger named Joy Wilson. She's known as Joy the Baker on the internet. She lives in New Orleans.
She's kind of famous. Yeah.
She's kind of famous. She teaches all these in-person classes in her home. And she started switching too, and was doing these online classes where people would be in their home doing whatever she's making. So at the same time, they're making biscuits, and she's giving you information. And I thought, how can I borrow from what's in my wheelhouse? What are my skill sets that I can do that works? That could be a series. It's ongoing. And I thought, you know what? I can all season. I can all summer long. I can all year, but I especially, like most people, it ramps up in the summertime. And I thought, this is something I'm already doing. This is something I love. I love all of the homesteading activities that are very labor intensive. So anything that's like where you really have to focus and be super present, that takes a long time and is mindful, I love it. And so I do all the canning in our house. And I was like, why not do that? People could be at home. They're in their PJs. They're having coffee. Maybe they're having a mimosa or a Bloody Mary. It's the weekend. You can do whatever
But
you
not
want,
too many, because canning's a little intense.
Because boiling cauldron of water. Exactly.
Yes. Just get a little loose
Don't
just
get
a little
crazy.
relaxed. Exactly. Don't come in totally, tie one on for this occasion. Wait until you're done. Wait until your jars seal and then you can crack open the bubbly. But I thought, why not just do this? It's something I love to do anyway. So I crafted this entire series. It came up with, I love a good bad pun. And so I thought Slow Jam sounded
Food writers
sounded great.
love some puns. That's right.
It's true. It's true. And to kind of speak to what you were mentioning right before this, I tell people all the time, if you aren't enjoying something that you're doing, don't do it. If keeping chickens doesn't bring you joy, or if it's not the right time, if something else in your life, you've just had a new baby or you have a job loss or you're grieving the loss of a parent, if it doesn't bring you joy, you don't have to do it. You don't have to do all the things. I have tried for years to grow certain crops in my heavily forested cove here in the wood. They just don't want to grow here. My organic farmer friend, a quarter mile up the road on a south-facing open sunny slope, he can do it with ease. And so instead of beating myself up, I just support him, So it's okay to not feel like you have to do every single thing. You find the one that brings you joy. And, in my case, I really, really love canning. And I thought this is something that I could give people that hands-on, hand-holding instruction. They're just doing it in their kitchen, which is probably better anyway than watching me demo it like I regularly do teaching a class. If people are actually in their kitchen, which is the place that they're going to be cooking real world time.
And follow it along. Right. And then you're also exponentially doing it. So with your own equipment, so there's going to be better recall the next time. So I love it. I think it's just brilliant for a creative use because I've made jams, and pickles, but I am of the age where I saw my grandmother's, green beans in the pressure cooker land on the ceiling, one time. I remember, my mom canning tomatoes like crazy every year. So it seemed like a lot. So I haven't really delved into that, but it is essentially boiling a jar until it heats up so much inside that the heat pulls out the air and makes a vacuum, right? And seals. Is that correct?
At its basic, that is describing canning. Basic, exactly. And then within that, there's water bath canning and pressure canning, and you have to employ those different practices depending on what you're making. If you're like your grandmother had to pressure can those green beans in a pressure canner, she couldn't do it in a boiling water bath because the beans themselves were too low acid. They wouldn't kill off botulism spores, which is the thing that everyone's afraid of. So the only way that you can safely can beans by themselves or corn by itself, or if you want to make soup or canned meats or fishes or anything like that that's considered low acid, the only way you can safely kill the botulism spore is by doing it in a pressure canner. If you're making anything that's considered high acid, which is all fruits or pickles or chutneys or jams or anything like that, it's totally fine to just do it in a boiling water bath. It's not gonna make the environment that's gonna make botulism spores go crazy. Botulism is everywhere. It exists in our environment. It's in the soil. It's only potentially hazardous when it's trapped in an anaerobic environment like a vacuum sealed glass jar. So, but if it's with a high acid food, it's fine. It's rendered, it's not going to hurt you. If it's with something low acid, then that's where the challenges come in. So for this series, I'm just sticking with water bath canning, but if it goes well, I might do a pressure canning series later.
We're going to be hearing a lot about things that we want to eat, like, especially in the South, like pickles and canned tomatoes. There's nothing to compare with a beautiful canned whole homegrown tomato. They're delicious, and the smell is like summer in a jar.
Yeah.
So, are you a sure gel person, or do we have to produce our own pectin?
I don't make a lot of preserves that call for supplemental pectin. Figs might be the one thing where, because they're so low on inherent pectin of their own, you have to use so much sugar to get them to gel properly. When I do use pectin, though, I tend to use Pomona's pectin if I'm using pectin. But for the most part, the things that I typically make, I don't end up using pectin. Not that I'm opposed to it. There's so many other foods that I do, like anything with the apple or pear family is very high acid, cranberries, cherries. Medium pectin is going to be like all your berries. But it's when you get into the low pectin foods that you really have to start bringing, the reinforcements in.
Right. Well, and you wrote a book about it, so that's why I wanted to ask.
And there's 10 in this series. It's going to be every Saturday starting this Saturday, July 18th, at 10 a.m. and running all the way through September 19th, every Saturday at 10 a.m. And there's availability that remaining in all of the classes.
What are some things that we need to have in our house ready for canning? Because I always remember when it comes in, when you go and pick in the garden, all of a sudden you're like, oh, we got a can tomorrow. So it's good to especially since we're limiting our trips right now, to go ahead and know. So I'm going to guess some jars, right?
Right. So you want, mason tempered glass jars that are intentionally, created for home canning use, as tempting as it is to upcycle like a old peanut butter or mayonnaise jar. Those aren't intended to be used multiple times. So, you need mason jars, with screw bands and lids. You'll need some sort of canner. You can purchase a canner, from like a hardware store or a big box retailer or even online that is specifically intended for water bath canning. A lot of them are enamel coated with a canning rack that you lift in and out. But if you don't have that, or if you don't want to buy it, you don't think you'll can enough or that frequently, you can just appropriate an existing stock pot that you have, as long as when your jars are in the pot, like 2 to 3 inches of water can boil on top of them, because you need the water to be circulating all around, above, beneath, and on the sides. So as long as your stock pot is deep enough to accommodate that, you can just use what you have. And then, some helpful extras are like a canning jar lifter. It looks like a regular pair of tongs, but it has plastic on one end that makes it really helpful to securely grab the canner when you're the jars when you're putting them in and out of the canner.
Because again, you're pulling them out of boiling water, so you don't want to touch them.
Exactly. And you could use tongs, but they're more likely to scratch the glass or, possibly even crack it. And these tongs are really easy to find. Again, you can get them online, but you can get them at any hardware store that has canning supplies, or most, you can get them at like Target or Walmart or any kind of big retailer too.
Ace Hardware around here always has good canning supplies. I always go there for my jars. It's just, it's small. I don't have to go through the lumber section in order to find what I need. I love it. Ace Hardware is not my sponsor, but you can call me Ace Hardware because you are happy if you feel like you need a sponsor. That's really exciting. And through all of this pivoting, through all of this work, you sound really hopeful about all of us learning some new skills. What's making you hungry? What's that next step that you're looking for after this Slow Jam series?
Well, I am a perennially hopeful person. A friend of mine the other day said that we were talking about blood type, and she was like, I'm B positive. And I was like, I'm B positive too. I think it's just who we are. Like, we just have to be positive. It's literally in our blood. Like, we're positive people. I wake up sunny side up always. Unfortunately, my husband is more of a counterbalance. Not that he doesn't see the glass half full. He's just way more pragmatic. So he helps me kind of rein it in and be like, well, let's see, we'll see how it goes. So he helps me to be more cautiously optimistic than my rose-colored glasses. But I feel very inspired by what I'm seeing people do. This has been an ongoing interest for always, honestly, but definitely ramped up. And I don't think it's going to go away. So I'm hoping to, moving forward, I would love to teach a series of backyard chicken classes. I would love to teach people how to keep bees, all of these things live while people are in their home. It would be lovely to be able to work with a videographer and do some more refined editing so that it doesn't have to just be live, so that people can purchase these classes out
later.
Exactly. And so that's on the horizon.
Mm-hmm. Well, I'm saddened that because I wanted nothing more. I had an Asheville trip planned for the summer, and I know you're not far, so I had wanted nothing more than to call you and say, "Can I come sit on your porch and we record?" So I hope that maybe if you do a chicken class and we are kind of through some things, that I can come up and learn how to hold a chicken. That would be really good.
It's going to happen.
I've done it once and it didn't go well. Let's just leave it at that.
So I teach a class on backyard chickens at the local community college, and I've taught it like 20 times, and I always wrap up the class. I have a chicken puppet that's like a plushy stuffed animal that my mom gave my 9-year-old son when he was little. And I always bring it to class with me, and I conclude the class by showing you how to hold a chicken. So I got you.
Oh, good. Excellent. Maybe I'll use that support stuffed animal throughout the class, and then I will be able to do it. Well, what is one aspect of your job that you've created for yourself? And congrats on creating such an amazing, interesting, every day is different kind of job. What is one aspect of that really meshes with an aspect of your personality?
Oh, wow. I think it would probably be either canning or baking. I'm very literal. I like my husband is very abstract. So if he's discussing a bigger concept, I'm like, give me for example. I'm going to ask you for an example. So paint me a picture, show me what you're talking about. And so I really love things where I am very much grounded in my body, and I'm present and I'm paying attention. And if I get distracted, I could cut off my finger or burn myself or something. I know It sounds kind of severe, but it's the same reason that like my husband brings in the wood for our wood stove, and I'm the one who tends the fire all day. I very much like to be very present and very focused and in my body. And I love those homesteading aspects that force that. When I'm working in the beehives, it's the same situation. You can't space out when you're working with the bees. They're not going to like it. So there's a mindfulness and a purpose that I find very satisfying. And so I think that, those particular aspects of homesteading really speak to me because of that.
What keeps you up at night?
Oh my gosh, trying to figure out what's next. It's like, because what I do isn't linear. I write books, I freelance for magazines, I teach classes. I'm going to do live classes now. Trying to find a way to make it be sustainable and also feel inspired by it, but feel like it's okay for me to be the one talking about it, making sure that I'm being inclusive and having conversations with other people and making my children aware of what's going on in the world right now, but not making them feel terrified or crippled, but feel inspired to and be hopeful to continue to offer remediations to heal relationships with people and heal relationships with the planet. And, so there's a lot that keeps me up at night.
That's good. Well, you sound positive for being lack of sleep. So that's good. Okay. So it's a small skill that I have, but I can time travel, and I have a magic picnic basket. And so those two things in tandem means I can bring you a dream meal. I can go back in time to conscript anybody to make anything specific for you. I can source worldwide for you. I can also cook a little bit, but probably it's going to have Sure-Gel in it if I make the jam. So, but it's good. I did a pear one, and I needed that. I felt like. So what am I going to bring you in that picnic basket?
Oh my goodness. Okay. So we're going to have the picnic in Scotland, first of all, because it is.
Hey, if you insist, place. I guess.
It's my favorite place in the world. My sister met and married a Scotsman just this past December before everything in the world shut down, and I was given immensely generous travel accommodations by my mother-in-law, and so I was able to go and be there for the wedding. The last time I was in Scotland was in 2006, with a friend, and it's where my lineage is from. It's where my ancestors were from. It's, aside from West North Carolina, it is the only place that I have traveled to that I have felt completely like my soul is so at ease there. So we would go there for our picnic to the Highlands, the Scottish Highlands, and we would have Scottish fare. We would have sheep's cheese. We would have, strong tea. We would have scotch. We would have some sort of seaweed because the Scots eat a lot of seaweed. And we would have all the organ meats. We would have haggis, and we would have blood sausage, and we would have all those innards that are so tasty and delicious. And of course, we'd have fish and chips, and it would be a feast, and it would be amazing.
That sounds so good. So on that note, if people want to learn more about Ashley English and her varied world, you can go to thesouthernfork.com, because I'm going to have a link directly from my world to hers, and you can click on that. You'll also be able to see a few images, so you can, as always, see the face behind the voice. I would highly suggest that you follow Ashley on Instagram, and it's not what you think it's going to be. Your Instagram handle is, Ashley?
It's Small Measure, SMALLMEASURE.
It will make you want to move in as her surrogate child. But if you like what you hear, there are real close to now, 200 episodes in the archives, covering all aspects of culinary culture that I'm interested in as a Southerner and somebody who is interested in learning about everything from brewing to baking to how to organize a tasting menu. But can't wait to learn and hear about your jams class, Ashley. And I really, really appreciate you sitting outside today so we can hear the songbirds in Candler.
Thank you so much for having me on.
Hello and welcome to Talking with My Mouthful. Y'all know I collect vintage cookbooks, right? Well, I mean, it should make sense, but I love those community cookbooks. I also really like just cookbooks from the 60s and 70s, and grandmother had a Better Homes and Gardens home canning cookbook, and I still have that on my bookshelf. I just want to give you a little PSA about choosing reading material and recipes for trying new kind of homesteading things in the kitchen. I like to, shockingly, fly by the seat of my pants a little bit. So the first things that I ever really tried homesteading wise were in the Foxfire books. And there's a whole series of those. I made blackberry cordial, and I tried to make dye with pokeberries, which I wouldn't suggest because they're poisonous. And I did some other kinds of things. But if you go back into old cookbooks, because everybody had this knowledge more than we do now in our modern societies, the directions leave a lot out. There's just a lot of things that if you don't know they're missing. So when you are going down this path, and I hope that you will, trying new things in the kitchen, from preserved lemons to kombucha to canning and pickling, the source matters, and you want to set yourself up for success. So if you know a little bit about chemistry and a little bit about cooking, or you've seen canning in the past from, like I mentioned, from my family, then you're just going to have a little more intrinsic knowledge. If not, pick something where it has very clear directions. I love a vintage cookbook. I love a vintage recipe, but proceed with caution. So thanks so much for listening today. And if you actually make something fun in your kitchen after listening to this episode, will you tag me, please? That's at Southern Fork on Instagram, please. I'd love to see it. Be able to cheer you on from my kitchen to yours. Okay, until next time.
You've been listening to The Southern Fork. I can't wait to bring you more culinary conversations.
But in the meantime, I have one question. Are you going to eat all that?